Welcome to the channel, and a very happy All Hallows Eve to you all. My name is Videosyncratic, and most people who know me know that I love monsters of all shapes and sizes. Their infinite variety, their oft obfuscated origins, and the cultural context from which they spring. These are but a few of the facets which make them all so fascinating to me, a fascination that has lasted for as long as I can remember. As many of you will already know, Bloodstained, Ritual of the Night is a video game released earlier in the year that is firmly in the Metroidvania subgenre of adventure game. To truncate a long story, the game was conceived by the former producer of the Castlevania series, Koji Igarashi, after his departure from Konami in 2014. The game is very much a spiritual successor to that hallowed series, and a very worthy one at that, capturing much the same atmosphere of gothic grandiosity. For fanatics of all that is fiendish such as myself, it also certainly lives up to its predecessor's reputation for featuring a macabre carnival of horrors to serve as its rogues gallery, in the process showcasing creatures from some very obscure corners of myth and legend indeed. In this video, I intend to assess the majority of the game's bestiary and find the origin, mythological or otherwise, of each entry. While I am very eager to begin, I also feel that I should prefer a few words of warning beforehand. Firstly, while I aim for this list to be fairly comprehensive, I also won't actually be covering every enemy in the game. This is partially for reasons of brevity, but I also want to avoid spoilers as much as possible. With regards to that second point, that is why this video is not going to cover any of the game's bosses or original characters, and it will also omit a few secret enemies which are very much worth you discovering on your own. These exceptions aside, I do intend on covering the vast majority of enemies in the game, so if you are playing through it and would rather discover them for yourself, then you may want to stop watching now. Secondly, many of these monsters reference both an original being from somewhere in world mythology, while also mirroring an enemy from the Castlevania series, either through their looks, behaviour, or both. Wherever this is the case, I will try to point it out and detail some of these parallels. Thirdly and finally, there are a lot of monsters in Bloodstained, just over 100 serving as regular enemies in fact. Thus, I have agonised over the best way to divide them up, and have decided to split them up according to their real-world origin. I appreciate there are flaws to this method, but it is what I have decided to stick with, and I will pin a table of contents in the comment section below to hopefully allow for easy navigation between different groups of monster. Without further ado, let's begin. The first set of monsters I want to get out of the way are those that exist as a direct shout out to something from the game's development, especially from its extremely successful Kickstarter campaign, as well as those references which don't really fit in anywhere else. The first in this category of spook is the Poltergeist. Now of course, the Poltergeist is a spirit which comes directly from real-world paranormal lore, it being an invisible but disruptive presence whose name in German can literally be taken to mean noisy ghost. Apropos of this description, the artistic choice to have a poltergeist represented by a possessed piece of furniture, in this case a portrait, is quite apt. However, the Poltergeist in Bloodstained also pays homage to a number of its backers from Kickstarter. Anyone who supported the game on any of the so-called ancestral bloodline tiers would be immortalised by having their likeness digitised and included in-game as the portraits seen in the background throughout the castle. The behaviour of the Poltergeist resembles that of a Castlevania enemy, albeit a fairly obscure one. In the central quarters of the ghost ship level in Rondo of Blood hangs a portrait of its captain. The manner in which it initially appears in the background, but then floats forward to attack the player, is almost identical to the behaviour of poltergeists in Bloodstained. Another set of enemies relating directly to the Kickstarter are the various giant animals which inhabit the castle. These are the 3 cats, Nyabon, Macaron and Kamikaze, and the 2 dogs, Puppy and Rocky. These were from the $3,500 tier of the Kickstarter, the main reward for which was to immortalise the supporter's pet, or another animal of their choice, as an enemy in-game. Next time you fight one of these beasts, just remember that you're actually fighting the representation of someone's beloved animal companion. I'm sure you don't need me to tell you that the Shovel Armour enemy is based directly on Yacht Club Games' Shovel Knight, a fellow successful indie game funded through Kickstarter. The reference goes a bit beyond just having Shovel Knight as an enemy, however, as one of his drops is his own armour. Equipping this armour essentially transforms Miriam, the player character, into Shovel Knight, with much the same moveset. In addition to being a rather charming love letter to Shovel Knight, this is also likely a reference to the old axe armour of the Castlevania series. This sapphire coloured enemy also sometimes appeared as a suit of armour that, when worn by the player character, would change their entire moveset into that of the old axe armour. The final entry in this category is the seemingly inexplicable Tamako-Death, an incongruously modern but otherwise human looking rock star. Apparently, she is a reference to the Japanese kawaii metal band Baby Metal, and that is all I'm going to say about that. However, an additional nice little reference can be found in the name of some of her drops. Her soul shard is named Upbeat Heart, after the Seattle-based rock band Heart, while her material drops are called Queen's Tears, paying homage to the British rock legend Queen. The Morte are by far the most original creation of Bloodstained, and quite a masterwork at that. In essence, one can assume that concentrated, unaltered Morte is a viscous black fluid that represents decay, death and corruption, and appears to manifest from the attempts of beings of malicious intent to manifest in our world. From a gameplay perspective, the Morte are quite ingenious, as they can twist themselves into various forms or possess different objects to create a variety of monsters, each with their own attack patterns but still maintaining a cohesive design. The simplest form of Morte takes a vaguely humanoid shape, and it slowly rises from the ground and advances towards the player, lacking any form of ranged attack. This method of attack, and their general association with corruption and decay, makes the basic Morte very similar to the classic zombie of Castlevania. Indeed, their very name can be taken to mean dead or deceased person in French, and similar words can be found in many other Romance languages. As though to showcase their variety, the very next Morte in the bestiary takes on a very different form, with it having fused with an immobile naval cannon. I'm a big fan of how the metal and wood of the cannon blend seamlessly with the fleshiness of the Morte itself to ambiguous effect. For example, are those teeth protruding from its muzzle, or are they just the ends of planks of wood? The Cannon Morte fills the niche of the bone pillar of the Castlevania series. They are both fiery projectile spewing enemies, whose motion is limited to turning around to face one of two directions. An additional feature they share is that they can be found both alone and stacked on top of each other, sometimes to obscene numbers. I will have to admit, I was disappointed upon actually encountering the Carriage Morte for the first time. Beforehand, I had imagined it as an imposing fusion of Morte and horse-drawn carriage. Anyway, the carriage this Morte has commandeered is actually a gun carriage, essentially making it a Cannon Morte but with the ability to trundle back and forth using what can only be described as its creepily long feet. Now we move on to what I actually consider to be the most disturbing monster in the game, the Bone Morte. Don't let its name fool you. The implications of this thing's existence are truly quite grim. However, before I explain this statement further, I will state its Castlevania parallel. It is the Bloodstained analogue to the classic skeleton, being a low-level monster encountered early into the game that nonetheless manages to make its mark by being some of the first enemies to use projectile attacks. As for why I find this creature to have such a capacity for horror, one must check its description. According to the in-game bestiary, the Bone Morte is the result of a Morte possessing a human body. This process is evidently extremely damaging to the host, as perhaps best shown by the fact that its bones are so corrupted that they are apparently melting. The pressing question in my mind is, was the human body the Morte possesses dead or alive when it took control? To possess a corpse is bad enough, but to find a living, conscious person and twist their body into this mangled heap of flesh is simply horrific. Can you imagine the last thing you see and feel before you lose consciousness forever is your own body bloating up and corroding away? The skin sloughs off, organs swell and rupture as they fill with a black fluid that seeps from every pore, and all around a curious sensation of sagging as the skeletal structure begins to melt. Apologies if that was all a tad graphic, but please forgive me, it is Halloween after all. Like a number of other enemies, the Bone Morte has an infernal equivalent called the Volcano Morte. This morte can be found in very hot environments, and seemingly has magma coursing through its veins. The final true morte on this list is the Bomber Morte, which is simply a regular morte fused via its arm with an explosive barrel, presumably filled with gunpowder. In terms of gameplay, they share some similarities with the bomber armour from Castlevania. Additionally, the soul shard it drops is named Bolide Blast. If you are wondering what a bolide is, it is a kind of very bright meteor known for exploding quite frequently. The Gieremund is an emaciated dog-like enemy first seen in the early sections of the castle. In terms of its origin, it does double duty. They are likely a reference to the black dog archetype seen throughout folklore, and are also a direct reference to a Castlevania enemy called the Black Panther. Many different cultures have a variation on the theme of a ghostly black dog that usually acts as an ill omen. I think it is worth noting that not all black dogs in folklore are bad. Some legends have them as distinctly neutral characters, and a few are even said to be the benevolent guardians of certain locations, much like real dogs. The Gieremund directly references the Black Panther enemy through both their physical design, as they are both quadrupedal animalistic monsters based on real-life carnivores, and also from a gameplay perspective. In both instances, they are alarmingly fast enemies that rush the player. Additionally, they both share a dark colour scheme and floor-hugging profile that helps them to blend into the background. As for their name, I will have to admit that I am not familiar with any mythological creature bearing it. However, there may very well be, as a similar canine enemy appears in Final Fantasy XI under the same name. From what I have been able to find, the name is a portmanteau from two early Germanic words, which can be taken to mean shriek mouth, or at a greater stretch, gaping jaws. The latter of these terms certainly brings images of Ragnarok to my mind. As for why I have lumped it in with the rest of the morte, upon closer inspection of the model, it appears to be made from the same material, and so from a lore perspective, it may be a morte taking canine form, or possessing an unfortunate dog. Similar to the aforementioned Volcano Morte, the Gieremund also has a fiery counterpart named the Hellhound, the name of which I believe speaks for itself. On that note, I think I'm going to have to end the video there. I am so sorry I've only ended up covering a small number of the huge number of enemies in Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. I didn't quite realise how long it would take me to cover everything I wanted to cover until I had recorded only half of my script, and it ended up being, well, over half an hour long. Preferably, I would try to keep these videos below the 30-minute mark so they are somewhat bite-sized at least. So now I suppose this is as good a time as any to announce that yes, I am actually going to make this into a series. I expect and hope to cover all of the enemies in the game, including bosses, within 3 episodes, but let's just see how that turns out. Anyway, if you've made it up to this point, then thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, then please consider liking, sharing, and possibly even subscribing, as my channel is still quite young and can do with any help you can provide in order to grow. I also would love to hear from you and what you have to say on the video in the comment section below. I am especially interested to hear what you think of my production and how I can improve in the future. I'm also on Twitter, so you can follow me there if you want a better idea about my upload schedule and also about videos I would like to bring out in the near future. I would also like to say a massive thank you to everyone who worked on the development of this game, and also all those who supported it beforehand. It truly is a worthy successor to the Castlevania franchise, and very much worth your time if you haven't played it already, so I really cannot recommend it enough. If you still haven't had your fill of spooky content yet, then my debut video was actually about the real-life ghost story behind the recent horror game, Man of Medan. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. As the script has already been written for the next episode, it shouldn't be too long until it comes out, fingers crossed. So I hope to see you then, if not sooner. Until then though, I hope you have a spectacular Halloween. Ciao!